Hello and welcome back to Empire Soccer Report. It's been a long layoff for Major League Soccer. It's been a long layoff for myself personally, but I am James Birle back to talk some Red Bull New York as MLS is back underway. It was a rough first week back into MLS action for the Red Bulls, losing to the Philadelphia Union 3-1 and then losing to Charlotte FC at home 2-0. Back-to-back losses in games that on paper at least could have been winnable. So not the greatest start back in action for Michael Bradley's men, but now back into the second half of the season, and we'll see what they are made of moving forward. Got a big clash at home again against Orlando City with a new face and Antoine Griezmann there in the purple with the Lions. For myself, I've just started a new job with CBS Golasso as a broadcast associate, so that's why you maybe haven't heard from me. These episodes are probably going to come a little bit more irregularly moving forward, so I apologize for that, but do have time to chop things back up and to get back into it. Was at the game on Saturday against Charlotte, got to speak to the players and Michael Bradley after the match, and I'm hoping to continue to do that when I can moving forward. Today's episode is going to be joined by Daniel Rebain of Area Sports Network, so let's just jump right into things here. And I'm going to welcome him in now. Here's Daniel Rebain of Area Sports Network. Dan, good to see you again. It's been a long time, but we're back at it. MLS is back underway. Long layoff with the World Cup. How have you been? How are you doing? And what do you think of the lackluster week to start things back up for the Red Bulls?
Yeah, right. We're right back into it. Right after the World Cup, just 3 days after, right back into it with a game, and then that next Saturday into it, another home game for Red Bull, and we're already 2 games deep. Just been a week. So it's been good, kind of getting back into the swing of things. I know you've been busy that World Cup. Congrats to you again on the gig at CBS Sports. So that was a fun time for you, I bet. But now we're back at Red Bull, and two results, negative results so far, and we'll see what happens this weekend with Orlando coming in.
Yeah, they're going to finish up back where they started. I shouldn't say finish up, but they're going to move up next to where they started. 2-1 victory at Orlando City started this whole season when it was a shock that Julian Hall, Audrey Mehmeti, and Matty Dos Santos would be in the team sheet, and now those names are written in pen, and those guys shined. Julian Hall got on the score sheet. Audrey Mehmeti was able to pitch in, and it was a dominant victory early on in the season, and everybody's kind of got excited. Okay, we're playing the kids. This is how it's going to go now. Orlando, maybe we're not the team that they are now. Certainly there's a big name that has joined the team, but also they fired longtime manager Oscar Pareja. Things just gotten a little bit stale, it seems, and they've gone in a new direction, and they have steadily climbed their way back up the table. They're still not, I would say, a contender, but they've fought their way back into becoming a relevant team once again within the Eastern Conference. They certainly were not in the opening weeks to months of the season. The Red Bulls, on the other hand, we're at the midway point of the season now. Like you said, couple losses to open up the first week back. It almost feels like a new season has started, really.
Yep.
But a loss on the road to Philly Union. This team never wins in Philly. And then they welcomed Charlotte FC to Red Bull Sports Illustrated Stadium. Caught myself. And it didn't go the way that they would have hoped. Yeah, on paper, 2 really bad results, but there's a lot to like from the performances in moments in Philly, and then I think the majority of the match against Charlotte, they had enough to get at least 1 goal, let alone an equalizer. But let's start there. The Philly game, it's further back in our memories. That game was 1-1 at one point, and then once Philly went 2-1 up, they kind of cruised to the rest of the game. Kevin Sullivan looked absolutely unbeatable, made Matty Dos Santos and Dylan Nealis have a really tough time. And then the one change in the lineup going into the Charlotte game, Dylan Nealis bumps out to the right fullback position. Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy goes to the bench. And then Julian Bazan comes in at the left center back position. We'd heard rumblings that maybe they weren't super convinced of Bazan's ability to take hold of that position. I mean, admittedly, that is what he was brought in to do, is to be that additional center back that they had been missing since the start of the year. But we've seen cameos from him at the right back position more so than in center back. He comes in, plays next to Justin Che. Yes, the team concedes 2 goals early, but I think individually, the defense did pretty well, at least defensively. There were some moments in possession where I thought each of them could have done a little bit better. But That being the one change going into Charlotte, seems that they really wanted to sort out the defense. Marshall Ruddy ends up being the odd man out and goes to the sidelines. Dylan Nealis moves over to the right back position. After the Philly game, I looked at the defense and I was thought there's not a single player here, maybe Justin Shea, who I thought performed well.
Mhm.
And then after the Charlotte game, yes, they lose 2-0, but I'm looking at the defense and thought, not so bad. What was your take on how the team defended in each of those games and Julian Bazan's insertion into the lineup?
Yeah, I think, like you said, they defended better against Charlotte, but it was those first two kind of inflections into the game down the wing where it ultimately cost Red Bull in that Charlotte game. The first goal where Dylan Nealis absolutely gets beat to the ball and his attacker kind of just spins off of him and through on goal and it's 1-0, right? And I think we'll kind of dive in deeper to maybe, Ronald Donkor, his game as well, and these first two games back has kind of been lackluster as well, and he was kind of at fault per se for both goals in that Charlotte game. But yeah, I think center at least at the center back position against Charlotte, I think
Yeah.
they played well. I like Bazan. I We saw kind of what he's able to bring as a center back with Red Bull too, and that's kind of he's comfortable with the ball at his feet. Both of his feet. His left was pretty good, distributing the ball up the field. He touched the ball a lot. I think they were kind of being a little bit maybe too passive and kind of going backward. And then both Bazan and Shea had to kind of try to get the ball back up the pitch, but it would ultimately like kind of recycle back to them. But I think both of them look solid in their individual efforts last Saturday, and I think that's probably the duo you have to go with the rest of the season, unless you're bringing in another starter, and then you could move out Che to right back. But I think both those guys kind of complement each other in different ways. Bazan being kind of that athletic freak, being able to make sprints, recoveries, win balls in the air as well. So I kind of like both of them. I think we'll see what they do at wingback. I think I was surprised that Dylan Nealis got the start at right back, especially over Jaquil Marshall-Rutty. Even though both had kind of, subpar games against Philly, I think they should have, kept going with Marshall-Rutty. I think he's just a better overall wingback at this point. And obviously, you're looking for more defense out of Dylan Nealis, but if he's not given to you like on that first goal where, he's absolutely wrenched down the left wing, I don't know what else he kind of provides for you, because we saw in the buildup, like he looked kind of lost, like when he was trying to tuck in and help the kind of build up from the back, it just wasn't working out down that right wing. So it's going to be interesting to see how Michael adjusts to that kind of situation. And, obviously Matty Dos Santos, on the other hand, is just going through his growing pains as a, 17 turning 18 left back who, again, shouldn't even be playing MLS right now. He would be an MLS Next Pro player right now if it weren't for, the lack of options at left back this preseason and him ultimately being given / him winning the job. So obviously he's just learning on the job, and that's what's going to happen when you're, an 18-year-old kind of thrown into first team football after, just one season of Next Pro last year. So overall, I think the defense obviously has to improve, but I feel like it's definitely in a positive direction with the two center backs in that pairing.
Yeah, I think I agree that that's probably going to be the partnership moving forward. There were obviously some concerns whether or not Bazan could make that position his own.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I texted you during the Philly game. They brought a center back off the bench, but they had two right backs playing center back with Nealis and Shea. And I
Yeah.
guess maybe you don't want to disrupt the rhythm. You started those guys at center back, keep them together. I agree with you. I was surprised to see Nealis get the start against Charlotte because he was especially poor against Philly in the center of defense.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe they felt he'd be more natural. And I'm glad you mentioned that his stepping into the channels in the build up phase for the Red Bulls against Charlotte. He was tucking in between, the central midfielders, the forward and the right winger, which was Cade Cowell. But he never got the ball. It was it would have been one thing if, they were trying to play it into him and he could play on a turn or drop it back to a Forsberg or a Donkor, but it never really worked. But they kept trying it so much, especially in the first half, that it seemed like it was, a tactic that came from the mind of Michael Bradley. It just
Mhm.
didn't pan out the way that they wanted. And I guess it makes sense, for if you're playing Nealis at the right back position, you wouldn't have Marshall Ruddy do that where he would tuck inside. You'd want him to stay wide and stretch the field in that way, stretch the field horizontally. And they didn't get a hold of the ball in that way, at least not in the first half.
Mhm.
And yeah, that first goal, unforgivable. And as far as the second goal, it was the same sort of
Literally
setup. They got
from the
beat.
other side.
They got beat on the other side in a similar way. It wasn't, an error in possession from Dos Santos or anything like that, but they got beat. And then the cutback, the pass right back into the zone 14 on top of the penalty area, and no one was there to mark Ashley Westwood. Pep Biel gets the first one. Westwood gets the second one. It's two goals from central midfield. So immediately you look at Ronald Donkor, who we both thought was ball watching on the first goal and maybe could have done better as well on the second goal. Mehmeti, I think, put a lot of pressure on himself to get back and cover the late running forward, but that
Mhm.
left space for the trailing midfielder, and there wasn't another midfielder to cover it. Um, and then ultimately that lead was too much to overcome in the end. And Dean Smith, I think, maybe changed what we've normally come to see from Charlotte. They sat a lot deeper. They were content to give New York the ball. So I don't want to give the Red Bulls too much credit for controlling the game in the final 70 minutes, but that is
Yeah.
what they did. They combined well in some moments on top of the penalty area, but it just felt like they didn't have the key to unlock the defense there.
Mhm.
Um, and eventually, we were all a little bit surprised to see Emil Forsberg get subbed off when he did. Partway through the second half, with about I think he came off with maybe 15 or so minutes.
Yeah, it was like
Uh,
20, yeah,
yeah,
2015,
and
yeah.
we were like, I understand, like he wasn't really in the game, but that's if you're playing against a low block team that's sitting in, that's kind of the player you want to be able to split things open and play through it. It didn't happen, so they have a lot, a week really to get prepared for Orlando, but they're going to do it now without arguably one of their more important players, and Adri Mehmeti picking up that second yellow in second half stoppage time for dissent. Um, I remember we were all a little bit surprised to see that card came out as quickly as it did. He had been jawing with the referee for most of the match, and hopefully, this is a learning moment for Mehmeti. We were able to ask Michael Bradley about it after the game, but before we get to that, what did you think of that moment, and where does this leave the Red Bulls for next week? I imagine we'll see Gustav Berggren.
Yeah, I think, it was ultimately just a weird situation, right? Like I look down for 1 second and I see the ref pull out a red, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, and then like you kind of just look back at it, and you guys were saying like it was just normal conversations, and I just take away that the ref just was not trying to hear it anymore all night, and that's certain refs, right? Certain refs, you're able to talk to them and like that. And there's 2 minutes left, and the ref just says, I'm done. Like, here's a second yellow, goodbye, right? And it's unfortunate, right? Because obviously Red Bull lose really like their most important player, right? Obviously, one of their better performing players has been Julian Hall and Jorge Ruvalcaba on the wing, offensively. But everybody knows that Adri Mehmeti kind of dictates what goes on for this team, right? Offensively and defensively in that midfield. He's just that important. So losing him is going to be difficult. And I think when we asked Michael, how are you going to deal with losing Adri and look towards Gustav Berggren, he said, "Yep, it's going to be a long week, long week." So he knows how important of a player he is. Audrey knows how important of a player he is, and the rest of the team knows it. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt. I think this is going to be the first time that he's just not on the field at all. I think he's played almost every minute this season. Maybe like a late cameo where he subbed off, but yeah, we'll see how Gustav kind of transitions into that role. He's usually in a double pivot when he was playing in Poland when he was playing as a six. So him as a lone six is going to be interesting to see how he kind of adapts to that role.
Yeah, I think we're not usually finding ourselves saying this, but as far as positions where the Red Bulls actually have a bit of depth,
Yeah,
and be at the
right.
number 6 position because after Audrey Mehmedi, they've got a TAM player in Gustav Berggren who really hasn't played as much as everybody expected him to
Mm,
this point. So it's a big chance for him to come in and solidify his place as, a more veteran player, at least in global footballing terms. He's been around the block and has won trophies in Sweden and Poland. And if he can come in and perform well against what's going to be a much better Orlando team than they faced earlier in the season, this is not so much a big favorite in terms of the Red Bulls. They're only 2 points clear of Orlando at the moment. They sit
yep.
tied for the final eighth and ninth places in the Eastern Conference playoff picture with 22 points with old rivals DC United. And they are now 17 points off of first place. Nashville SC is just cruising towards the top. They're closer to the bottom than they are the top. So that is the situation for the Red Bulls right now. Coming out of the long break with two not so great losses. I'll remind you, they entered the break unbeaten in 4. They won 3 and
Yeah.
drew 1. So
Yep.
things were going well. It was a bad time to have that big layoff. For another player, that's a bad time to have that layoff is Ben Julian Hall, who you had that hat trick against Columbus back in May. Since then, hasn't gotten onto the score sheet. Did get an assist against Sporting KC. This is 4 matches in a row without a goal for Julian. Young Julian Hall, be patient with him. He's had a great season to this point. But there's now going to be a little bit more asked of him. Currently, he's in Charlotte with the MLS All-Stars, Julian Hall. Certainly deserved for how good he's been at the beginning of the season. And we'll see if he can get back into the goal-scoring graces. We mentioned that we got a chance to ask Michael Bradley about any interaction he might have had with Audrey Mehmedi after that red card. Here it is now. Take a listen.
Was there anything that you or Audrey shared with each other after that moment towards the end of the match? Just anything that you guys might have said?
He and I spoke inside. At that point, it was just making sure that he went inside and didn't and didn't do anything that was going to get him in more trouble. So he and I spoke, and that part was important after a situation in a night like this. Audrey's a really, really talented young player. He has so many good qualities. He's been so important for us this year, and it's all part of growing, maturing. So he'll learn from it in good ways. He's going in a really good direction.
All right, so that was Michael Bradley on young Audrey Mehmedi. A strange moment. Shown the first, I believe the first red card of his professional career. Maybe he got one with Red Bulls too that I'm not aware of, but it's certainly the first of his MLS career. Yeah, just overall, it's going to leave the Red Bulls a little short-handed against Orlando. We both mentioned how important of a player he's been, but before we move on to talk about that Orlando match, let's take a look at another midfielder who we both have now mentioned in Ronnie Donkor, who we thought wasn't good enough against Charlotte, unfortunately. But now this has been a little while, and I would argue even going into the break where he maybe hasn't looked as strong as he did at the very beginning of the season. Your friend and mine, Sanjay Sujanthakumar of Backheeled and The Guardian and several other outlets, he mentioned that he felt as though that's the biggest change from the beginning of the season is Donkor's not quite as dominant. And maybe there's a little bit of wear and tear. Maybe he's dealing with something that's nagging. It's not something that we're privy to, but it's very clear that he's not been as effective lately as he was early in the season. Maybe we can be a little bit charitable to him, is that throughout the match against Charlotte, it looked like a team that didn't have 3 weeks in a row to just train. Like there were 5 to 10 yard passes that they were just not keyed in on.
That's what I was saying.
Ruvalcaba thought he had Dos Santos overlapping and just played it out for a goal kick, and that everyone in the stadium groaned. And by the way, mentioning the stadium, terrific crowd at Sports Illustrated Stadium. I believe it was over 22,000 in attendance. But Charlotte did very well to take the game early and take the wind out of the crowd sails. It just wasn't the best environment after that. They just couldn't get the fans back into it. If they had gotten a goal before halftime, after halftime, maybe that would have been something to bring the crowd back up into it. But it never happened. I started all this with a question about Ronald Donkor. Just what do you think about what we're seeing now from him versus at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, I feel like I just want to touch on what the team has looked like these first two games back. It looked like they picked up a ball for the first time that Monday and like went into the game with two like days of practice and that was it, right? That's what it looked like. Like, and just to go back to Doncor, like he at certain points in the game he couldn't even like connect a 5 yard pass. He was just like being lazy with his passes, and I feel like that's probably what's on him more. I don't think it's like a physical issue. I think something's weighing on him mentally, right? Because like these are just like easy passes you would see him make, right? He's passing the ball behind guys. He's just losing the ball in possession. It's just out of the ordinary for Ronnie. And maybe he was hoping for a potential move after a strong start. I don't know. I don't know what's in his head right there, but definitely something I feel like is on his mind there. And hopefully he could kind of rebound that and regain his form because again, like you mentioned, like he was one of Red Bull's most important players, especially in that midfield next to Audrey in that first half. Like he kind of, was able to create a lot in midfield and ultimately led to a lot of goals, secondary assists as well. So they need a player like him to kind of rebound and like I mentioned to Bradley, obviously this was a straight Julian Hall question, but you know, with there's no depth on this team. So is there a point where you just start running guys into the ground? Like, for Julian, he's never played a full pro season at one level. He's mostly come off the bench. He's always up and down between teams ever since he signed with Red Bull too. I mean, his homegrown. So Doncor with the same thing. He's kind of never been a full-time starter. So at a certain point, when you look at some of these guys who are kind of, setting career marks for minutes played in a season, are they getting fatigued? Is something else physically going on? Like you said, with the wear and tear, is that going on, right? And with literally zero depth that you trust on this team, at a certain point, we've seen it before. Like you're gonna just start running guys into the ground and hopefully they perform. But when it's, young guys like 21, 20, 19, and 18-year olds doing this is the first time they're kind of going through this adversity of playing 90 minutes week in and week out. And like I said with Matty Dos Santos, they're kind of just learning on the fly of how to deal with all that. And Michael kind of just brought it up where at a certain point in their careers, they're gonna have to learn about, playing through pain and all this, kind of finding how to treat your body right, recovery and all that, right? But if they're just gonna play 90 minutes for 17 more games with the same lineup, I don't know, man. I don't know if this team can last. So that's definitely an interesting tidbit to keep an eye on. Is like the depth on this team could eventually cost them in the long run.
Well, I want to talk about the depth in a second. You mentioned that some moments in that game look maybe lazy from Doncor. I would agree with that characterization.
But that's just from I feel like that was from a lot of people. But like,
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's because that first error from Dylan Nealis, it's not like he took a poor touch. It's he didn't check his shoulder and didn't see that he had a player bearing down on him, and it's very lazy in that way, and didn't do the enough of the work to prevent what should have been. It's an unforced error that leads to that goal, and there was a lot of that. I think they ironed out the laziness by the second half, but you shouldn't have to go 2-0 down to then start playing, especially when you've just lost to a very young, energetic Philadelphia team on Wednesday that should maybe want to get you back into the motivation. The crowd should have been motivation enough.
Yep.
But there's a ton of characteristics of the way that the players played that were unacceptable. And Doncor unfortunately fit into that as well. As for the depth of the team, I mean, there's a number of things to talk about. I want to start because we've just referred to Red Bulls too. There have now been, a fair bit of exchange between some of the fringe players within the first team and some of the top players of the second team. And I think this past week has been the greatest portrayal of that. Coming out of this break, maybe some players are training better than others. Michael Bradley wants to reward those players, and Dominic Vollert maybe has his own opinions. And obviously, these two coaches are in frequent communication. Michael Bradley knows the Red Bull 2 setup very well. He won MLS Next Pro with them a season ago. But Juan Mina played against Crown Legacy at the right back position with Red Bulls 2. And we've seen some promising performances from him with the first team. Neuen Benedetti, Dennis Yangor, and Rold Mitchell all started with the reserves. I mean, Yangor, we've come to expect. He's been with the reserves for most of this season.
Yeah.
Benedetti and Mitchell had just kind of started to get reintegrated with the first team, and Mina himself. So that was a bit of a surprise. And then meanwhile, you've got Mihir Jimenez, who makes his MLS debut. You've got Nate Worth, who's been on the bench now for a couple games running. We've seen Omar Valencia bounce up and down. He's now played in 2 straight games off the bench. Not something that we've been accustomed to a lot this season. Andy Rojas comes in off the bench. So it's for me, it's telling which guys are getting brought into the first team and which guys are going back and playing with Red Bulls 2. This could be fitness related, could be injury related. They could have, spent time away with family. We don't know all of this, but what we do know is that there's been an exchange there. So it says that, the depth isn't fully ironed out. And there's some bigger names who have been left out of some match days that we're going to talk about in a second. But what do you make of seeing guys like Nate Worth and Mihir Jimenez get brought up within the first team, and then guys like Neuen Benedetti and Juan Mina go back down to the second team?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think, maybe in like a Benedetti or Mitchell's case, it's just about getting minutes, right? Because I feel like consistently they've kind of been in the rotation for the first team. And maybe it's just trying to get Jimenez and Worth a look as well, because they've also been in first team training as well. And I know Michael Bradley likes Nate Worth a lot. He's one of the reasons why Nate ultimately re-signed with Red Bull from Tampa Bay. So just like touching on the overall depth, I think when we first started the season, I think I was looking at this team, right? And obviously they gutted the roster of kind of like the excess fat, right? And they were able to replace, certain guys, but overall they didn't replace everybody. And I think coming into the season, I think it was about, especially in preseason, I think it was about Michael kind of weeding through everybody that kind of fits his style, and whoever doesn't, I feel like was going to get left behind. And I feel like we're starting to see a lot of the guys that just aren't fit for this current Red Bull team, and eventually they're going to be either gone or let go in the future. Certain guys we'll talk about have their contracts coming up. Certain guys might get traded in the near future. So I think you're starting to see it with Bradley, right? Sure, he might not have enough depth, but if he doesn't feel like you're going to go on the pitch and bring a positive attribute to the team and how he wants to play, you're not going to play at all. So I feel like he's just weeding out the rest of the roster, and I think that was going to be a big thing this year, was about kind of finding the guys that work, finding the guys that he wants to keep, and then build on top of that. So I feel like we're already halfway through. We're kind of seeing the guys that he trusts and week in and week out, and I think he's just trying to figure out a couple more guys and see if they can make it at the first team level. And we kind of saw a little bit of a positive impact from Jimenez off the bench. I think in his short time on the field, I think he has a few positive impacts, especially that one where Sofo kind of, got to do better there, maybe shoot first time across body. But overall, I think it's just going to be Michael kind of finding who he wants to kind of have on the bench going forward.
Yeah, for that reason, I was like, well, we might as well trot out Nate Worth at this point. You brought off Forsberg, you got 20 minutes, you're down 2-0. I don't think that, Jimenez, goes in, plays as a striker, and they bring Julian Hall back into the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the Julian Hall midfield experiments.
I don't like that either. Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and act like I know more about midfielders than Michael Bradley, but I haven't seen Julian Hall, receive the ball on a half turn and
Mm.
run out of defense, or even combine with some pretty interplay as a central midfielder. Just hasn't happened yet. Maybe there's something that we're missing.
I would have just pushed him out to one of the wings,
Yeah.
and then had Worth come in.
But Ruvalcaba um
Sofo.
and Cowell, I'm saying, both came off
Oh,
for Sofo and Rojas later in the match. So, he brought like for like wingers on, which, is fine. But perhaps, he's given up on the Rojas as a central midfielder experiment as well.
that's also
We'll
good
see. I
because
mean, the versatility is a very clear theme here. And let's not take away credit to Charlotte. There's an excellent game plan from Dean Smith. I believe Michael Bradley was outcoached a little bit in this one. I think individually in the midfield, they won the match. And then Christian Kalina might still be the best goalkeeper in Major League Soccer. He was very good in goal. He had four
oh,
very good saves.
the Audrey save.
Yeah,
I
he had
mean,
he had a few that were, but I still think the Red Bulls did enough to at least get one. So, 2-0
mm,
loss, it hurts, especially at home in front of that crowd. I think they were maybe a bit better than the scoreline suggested. Credit due to Charlotte, very good win for them on the road. And now the Red Bulls, luckily enough, will stay at home against Orlando City, who are coming off of a 1-0 win against Nashville. That is important. Admittedly, Nashville without Christian Espinoza, but still a 1-0 win over Nashville. And I don't believe that Yazbek played for Nashville either. So they're missing two key starters, but still, that's a very good win for an Orlando team that were in the basement throughout the first month and a half of the season. And of course, the shiny new DP, Antoine Griezmann, that's a game-changing signing right there.
mm.
Uh, I think that Orlando are probably going to start a little bit differently to how they did against the Red Bulls in the opener of the season. Maxime Crepeau will be in goal. Griffin Dorsey will be at the right back position. Left back will be Bernardo Gonçalves. Robin Janssen, the captain, and David Brekalo in center defense. I think Brekalo really is the weakness in there. Better as a left fullback, in my opinion, has struggled getting settled in as a central defender, at least in this system. Ivan Angulo, right back. Thiago Carvalho, sorry, not right back, right wing. Angulo, Carvalho, left wing. Angulo did play a little bit of right wing back, admittedly, at the start of the season. Brian Ojeda, who was at the World Cup in central midfield. Luis Otavio, the youngster next to him. Antoine Griezmann in the 10. And then Justin Ellis, who has been with Orlando City B for a while. He's going to be up front.
The battle of teenagers up front.
Yeah, I mean, that's a team that got a 1-0 win at home against Nashville. It's a very good result for where Orlando was at the start of the season. I don't foresee many changes for the Red Bulls other than the one that they will have to make for Adrian Mehdi. I think Ethan Horvath will be in goal. I think they should go to Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy at right back.
Yeah.
Dylan Nealis was better in that Charlotte game than he was against Philly. But I thought that his performance against Philly was enough to take him out of the 11. I've said this many times. Dylan Nealis was born to be the first defender off the bench for an MLS team, whether that's as a right back or as a center back. He's got that steadiness that doesn't need. You don't need to be in a game for 60
He's a spot
minutes.
starter.
Yeah, for a lot of defenders, if you're already in the game, you don't want to disrupt their rhythm. He's one of those guys that you can just insert him in and he'll give you what he's always going to give you. Che and Bazan, I want to see that center back duo again. They're going to be tested with this Orlando attack. Matty Dos Santos, I think, will go back to left back. I think he looked better against Charlotte than he did against Philly. I think he's earned the start again. And, whether he's earned the start or if no one is able to take the job from him is up for debate. But credit to Matty Dos Santos for still being the best left back in this squad. Gustav Bergen will be as the 6.
Yep.
Donkor and Forsberg will be in front of him. And then from right to left up front, Cade Cowell, Julian Hall, and Jorge Ruvalcaba. Quick thoughts on that starting 11 for New York.
Yeah, I think, you talked about bringing Marshall-Ruddy back in at right back. I would do the same. In midfield, if they're going to call up Nate Worth again, I would consider giving him a start over Donkor. I feel like Donkor needs to take, a reset. I think he should go on the bench for a game, kind of just reset himself overall and see what Nate Worth can do, man. I think, he's had a lackluster offensive production season for Red Bull too, but he's taken on a lot of responsibility for that team. Just kind of like what Adrian Mehdi did last year, where he took on the armband and kind of did a lot of things, behind the scenes, just, not in the offensive third leading to goals and assists, but in his defensive side of the thing, kind of settling things down for his team. I think giving Nate, rewarding Nate for what he's done this season so far, and kind of giving him a look in the team next to Berggren and Forsberg would be, I feel like, a good way to go. And then maybe up top, you kind of look to shuffle some things around. I think you kind of have to start Julian Hall and probably Ruvalcaba, but maybe you give Andy Rojas a start at right wing. I think he looked pretty good in his 10 minutes or 15 minutes that he was on the field. I think he showed some flashes there. I feel like this team needs just a little bit of a shake up. I feel like some guys feel maybe a little bit too comfortable, and maybe you gotta, shake some things up and say, hey, you're not a guaranteed starter. You're never going to be a guaranteed starter. You need to fight every week. So maybe just shuffle some things up for Michael Bradley.
It's a couple games in a row where the other team gets a goal early, and it kind of handcuffs you guys into playing a certain way. You got control of the game for most of it, but just what do you think you attribute that to? How do you guys correct that moving forward?
Yeah, it's irritating. It's irritating to concede easy goals in the beginning, and then we have to chase it because it's unnecessary. I think the goals we concede as well is unnecessary. So it's just irritating. It's an irritating feeling to have because I think we're so good with the ball and also without the ball, but those small details we have to get better at because it's football. It's not easy as well. We play against good teams with good players and good ideas as well. So it's just not on ourselves. But just those small things in the beginning of the games, or just corner kicks, free kicks, to get better at those stuff. Because if we get better at those stuff and a little bit more sharper, big things coming. I'm sure that I'm very, very, very confident of the team and what we can achieve this year.
Yeah. So Michael Bradley maybe got some things to think about in terms of the lineup ahead of Saturday at home against Orlando. It's all going to be August already. August 1st. That's crazy. It's moving like crazy. I can't believe the World Cup came and went. Like we've been talking about that for 8 years.
Hockey season's about to be back.
Dude, don't remind me. Don't remind me. We got to talk some Devils soon, man. But regardless, it's a strong team for Orlando. Yeah, on paper, I think they started the season with a strong team and just couldn't put it together. They didn't have Martin Ojeda available against Nashville and were still able to beat them. He's dealing with a thigh strain. I'm not sure what his availability will look like ahead of Saturday, but right now, that's a potentially like two-pronged attacking midfield with Griezmann and Ojeda. You could even play Griezmann further forward if you want. They've got Vilder Cartagena off the bench, Tyrese Spicer. They've Iago and Marine. They've got options in the defense as well. So this is a team that's got some depth and is picking up a little more wind behind their sails. They've got to make it difficult for the Red Bulls on Saturday if the Red Bulls don't come out strong. They did not come out strong in the opening against Philly or Charlotte. They played some decent football in those moments in the early 10-15 minutes, but couldn't get a hold of the game and gave away cheap goals. Very, very cheap goals to Charlotte especially and to Philly as well. So that's something they're going to have to sort out. The mentality from the start needs to be better from Michael Bradley's men. We talked about depth now just for Orlando. We've talked about depth as it pertains to Red Bull 2 players. There is admittedly, I think, maybe the biggest story surrounding the club right now. We're in the middle of the transfer window. Some teams are bringing players in. The team across the river is making some big splashes, bringing in players from the Brazilian league, bringing in players from Europe. They've got Luigi and Benny Traore to bolster the attack. In just this window alone, they've been linked with a player like Christian Pulisic as well.
Lukaku as well.
Lukaku, there's some they're being ambitious in a way that currently at least the Red Bulls are not. And there are some names that have not been on the team sheets that weren't listed as injured until Michael Bradley's comments post-match, which we will play for you in a minute. But obviously at the top of that list is DP striker Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, fresh off a 17-goal season, has played second fiddle to Julian Hall. But, I felt myself wondering, how could he not come off the bench in this Charlotte game? It just felt like, you need one more player who could potentially be a better presence in the air, a better presence, can hold a defender off his back and link things up a little bit more in those tight spaces. It's not necessarily the game he's best known for, but it's something that he can add to the match. But he wasn't available. And I'm thinking, you want a little more dynamism and pace on the wings, or maybe another option to play as a wingback and can help push the team forward. And Cameron Harper, and he's not been available. He came back before the break, um, briefly against Sporting KC, and the thought was, okay, he'll have this whole long break for the World Cup to really get fit. And now he's not in the team sheets. And then Robbie Volader, who was brought in to be the replacement for Alexander Hack. And then when Noah Ayla got sent off to Bristol, became Robbie Volader's position to lose that left center back position. He's the left-footed defender. Julian Bazan is not left-footed. Dylan Nealis is not left-footed. And those have been the guys playing as the left-sided center backs. The three of those guys, Volader, Choupo-Moting, Cameron Harper, not listed as injured, but were not in the team sheet. I guess that has kind of hypothesized some folks into thinking, well, maybe those guys are up for sale soon, and maybe those guys aren't stuck around. But Michael Bradley did provide that those guys have some physical issues. Choupo-Moting hasn't played since early May, I don't think. Maybe it goes back a little bit further than that.
I think he's at the Chicago game.
Right. And then Cameron Harper, like I said, had that cameo against KC and hasn't come back in. And Volader, he didn't even mention Volader in response to that question from our friend Michael Batista. Before we play the clip, what is your thoughts about those players not being into the lineup? How does that, not even having them available from the bench, how does that handcuff this team and their depth options? And what do you read into it as the likely cause?
Well, when we play the clip, you want to play the clip first? Let's play the clip first.
Here's what Michael Bradley had to say.
Just to ask, is there any update on Choupo or Cam not being on the roster today, or any update on them?
Choupo has, Choupo's last game was May 9th in Chicago. And then since that game has been dealing with a few different physical issues. Nothing big, but obviously he was out for a few weeks before the break, and then the issue that he initially had, then as he was coming back from that, as he was working during the break, then another little issue popped up, and so we're just trying to spend the time with him now to make sure that we build him up in a way that physically he's ready. So he's back in training now, and so we'll continue to now push him along and build him up so that we can get him to the point where he's ready to give us his qualities and give us some really important minutes. Cam obviously worked really hard to get back from his knee injury last year, and there was, it's normal when you have a really long injury, there's a few little issues along the way. He came into the game against Kansas City, the last game before the break, helped us in at the end of that game, and then he picked up a little knock as we were training when we came back, and so he is also back in team training now, but just again needs time to build himself up from a physical standpoint so that he's ready.
So there you have it. Physical issues, a little knock for Harper, but neither listed on the injury list provided by the MLS Players Association. So yeah, Dan, what do you make of that? I mean, there's certainly a lot of people who think that this is a little bit of a PR spin from Bradley and he's not giving us the whole truth.
Well, I can say for 100% that he's definitely covering up the Choupo stuff, because he's definitely not injured. He's just not practicing right now with the first team, and he said that he was in first team training, but if I recall, he was training individually all last week leading up into the game. So maybe that's changed this week, but from multiple people that I've talked to, it doesn't seem like Choupo's gonna play for the team again this season. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. It's just certain things behind the scenes, attitude, his willingness to maybe play in a specific role hasn't been agreed upon. So it's kind of left him and the team in limbo, especially with the amount of money he makes, right? And the ability not to get off that contract before the end of the season. And then Harper, I don't know. I can believe potentially that he probably re-aggravated something over the break. So, well, I guess we'll have to just wait and see on his situation if he is back in training. I don't think he was in training at all leading up into the game last week. So interesting that if they are dealing with injuries, that they're not on the injury report. So again, that kind of just leads you to believe that they're probably not injured, right? And then Veloda, we kind of know why he's not in the roster because he's not MLS quality at this point in time. So kind of just freeing up that space for other players that have just been better than him this season. It's a shame because of, again, how much money he's making. He's making over $600,000 per season. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, three kind of key pieces that you would look at coming into the season, right? That were at least going to be making an impact, whether that is in the starting lineup or off the bench as an impact sub, or just not available at all. And that's kind of another thing that's just tying up the front office, where they just have no cap space and they have no TAM or GAM, whichever one it is, just to make moves. They just don't have any of it. Coming into the season, they didn't have it. So this summer to even make a depth move has kind of been a struggle for them, and we've seen it so far with the first couple of weeks of the transfer window. So it's gonna be it's dicey. It's a dicey situation for Julian de Guzman, and I'm giving him that leeway because he's kind of in cap hell right now, and he's trying to work his way out of it. So it's going to be hard to make a move or two before the window closes. But yeah, with those three guys not even getting a sniff of the match day roster, it's definitely hampering this team.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just so many positions here that could use a little bit of more competition at the very least, instead of an additional player that could start in this role, an additional player that could be an impact. We look at in the center of defense now, they've got enough bodies there. It's just, where is the ceiling? The floor is pretty high, but the ceiling is not so high. At the right back position, I would argue the same thing. The left back position is very thin. That's why Dos Santos is in there. So Robbie Volader for me is a guy that could absolutely be, your first left-footed center back off the bench. But if you mention the money he's making, he has to kind of start if you're making that much as a center back. The Red Bulls kind of learned this lesson last year with Sean Nealis, and that's why he's no longer with the club. As he was
Alexander Hack as well.
Alexander Hack, 100%. Those two guys were combined making about $2 million or close to it. And that's too expensive for two center backs who will not start for you. I think like looking back to the offseason, I think they made a lot of correct moves, prioritizing Dylan, prioritizing Tim Parker. I think maybe looking back, they probably could have kept Peter Stroud. Would have been nicer to have another central midfielder to choose from within here. But other than that, it's they made the right moves in terms of some flexibility, but now they're a little bit handcuffed in terms of who's in and who's out. So we'll see what lies moving forward for the guys like Harper and Choupo-Moting especially, and Volader as well. Harper, like you mentioned, it's more believable that he had a knock. And again, we don't know. I think from what I heard, Choupo-Moting was briefly training with the first team and then went back to training individually or just doing stuff within the gym. I don't know if he was seen out on the field this week most recently. But yeah, that's the situation that they're in now. I've spoken with Michael Bradley many times about Cam Harper. I'm a huge Cam Harper fan. I think what he has done with this team, playing a number of different roles, has been very impressive. Injuries have been an issue for him in the past, but he's a player that we've seen be very impactful at that level of MLS, whether as the first winger off the bench or as a wing back in a back five or as a fullback. This is a guy who's a classic wide player who will give you something positive if he gets the opportunity to play. Just haven't seen it lately. So yeah, he's had setbacks before with this knee injury. Not so surprised to hear that might be the cause yet, but we've also heard rumblings that maybe he's a little bit upset with how his situation's been dealt. So we will wait and see when these things come to fruition.
There's been rumors that he's asked for a trade. We haven't been able to confirm that at all, and probably won't be able to confirm that until potentially he is traded, but or unless it comes out of his mouth. So Yeah, for right now, it seems like he could be a bit disgruntled, along with maybe a bit of a setback.
And the transfer window opened back in July 13th during the final week of the World Cup, and it is open until September 2nd. So there's a lot of time for things to get sorted out, but we're at the halfway point of the season now. It would be nice to see things start to get sorted out sooner rather than later, because eventually there's going to be some hard ground to cover. And the Red Bulls are slipping out of the playoff picture as we speak. So, with that said, a strong Orlando team that's only getting better, a Red Bulls team that, by all accounts, it's not getting better at least quickly enough. They've regressed a little bit in terms of their results lately. Let's do some score predictions and then let's get out of here. And then we'll mention another player who's made a notable loan move that's worth mentioning. But before we do that, your score for Saturday.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth with this, right? Because they've struggled in the attacking third, finishing wise, right? They peppered the goal a lot against Charlotte and against Philly. It was kind of a bit of a struggle, and going back to the friendlies, kind of leading in back into a regular season play. It sounded like they were also struggling to score goals in those certain friendlies. So it seems like again they're relying heavily on Julian Hall up there, and eventually I feel like it is going to catch up to them where fatigue's going to set in for a young guy, and playing as many games as he has, as many 90s as he had, right, and kind of not being able to get spelled at certain points of game when we've seen him go from striker where he hasn't been able to perform the last 4 games, and they're dropping him into midfield where he has to do extra work, right? And so I don't know. I don't know if I see a positive result out of this. I'm thinking that we're gonna see another loss, and I'm gonna say probably a 2-1 Orlando win.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds pretty likely. I don't know how this team is going to prevent this Orlando
Also, I just
side.
want to caveat: every time I predict a win, they lose. So
All right, we
maybe
played
it
some
is
mind games.
maybe it is just kind of doing some mind games. But I truly believe, like, until we see multiple goals scored again, I feel like this team it's gonna start building on them, right? Where it's gonna be, all right, guys, we need a goal here, and they're in the 30th minute, right? And it's gonna be
That's
in their head. So I think maybe they get one, but I feel like they're gonna be down 1-0. They could get an equalizer, and then Orlando might come out of here with a 2-1 victory.
that's what gives me pause about predicting a win or even a 2-2 draw, is that I don't know if I can see right now.
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
see
Right
the Red
now.
Bulls putting up multiple goals in a match. Now they could have come out flying,
Hmm.
wanting to correct their
And
mistakes.
we've
They
seen
could get
that.
one early,
Yep.
and then they, end up scoring two, maybe three. Like this is a team that has looked better in the attacking phase, certainly than they did last year.
Hmm.
And this is a team that that has the ability to hurt you, just hasn't shown up so much in the last few weeks. So in the sake of not picking the same thing as you, I'm going to say 1-1 draw. I
Hmm.
think, defensively, they're going to iron out some of those issues. We haven't talked about Ethan Horvath either. I think there was a case that he could have done better on some of those goals against Philly. The first one, is one of those weird ones where the keeper comes out, collects it, and then falls on his own player. That's unlucky. Yes, you'd hope he holds on to it and does better. But the second one, he gets beat near post and is kind of maybe anticipating far post. It's unsighted for him, but you hope maybe his reaction time a little bit better. He made a couple of big saves in that Philly game, so I
No,
wasn't
he
so
did. Yeah.
concerned. Wasn't so concerned in the end about like picking the goals he conceded apart. And then the same thing against Charlotte is like, could he have done better on one or two of both of those goals? Like perhaps, but like those issues were certainly in front of him. So I think you've maybe gotten average to slightly below average MLS starting goalkeeping from Ethan Horvath. Would you like that to be better? Yes. Have we seen him perform better both this season and in past with clubs? Yeah, but he also does feel like a goalkeeper, maybe not fully confident. A goalkeeper who has lost jobs in several of his stops previously.
Yeah.
And I think, with time, being the confirmed starting goalkeeper at a club will start to bring him more confidence, feel more natural. I would have hoped that he'd gotten more of that by now, but I think like he's not the issue with this team, and I don't think, bringing back prime Luis Robles, do the Red Bulls win either of those last two matches? That's just my assessment of the goalkeeping, and I bring that up because there's another goalkeeper out on loan. We've seen this happen now several times in the recent past with Red Bull New York. But young Aiden Stokes is going to go on loan to Brentford, where he'll be expected to play with their reserves in the Premier League. I guess I don't know what
Prem
the
two.
name. Prem 2, I guess is that what they call it?
Yeah, it's the U21 league.
It's the U21
It's
division.
basically their version of MLS Next.
Yeah. The question that we both had is he going to play with Brentford's reserves? Because I imagine it's pretty competitive there. Aiden Stokes has got a high ceiling, has been, the Red Bulls 2 goalkeeper, but now that belongs to Tobias Ševčík, who, is young, very promising. You liken Ševčík to be maybe the most promising young player Red Bull 2 has at the moment. So that'll be good for him to get some consistent minutes with Red Bulls 2. But what do you think this could mean for Aiden Stokes and the goalkeeping room for Red Bull New York? And then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I kind of reported this last week where that news kind of, came out of nowhere where, yeah, he was going out on loan. And it's an interesting move for him, right? I said at the beginning of the year, like, I think he kind of he should have graduated from MLS Next, where either he was getting, this was before the Ethan Horvath move, but either giving him time with the first team, kind of rotating in with John McCarthy, and getting that MLS experience, or send him out on loan to maybe a USL team or over in Europe where he would get professional minutes, right? And so now he's gonna get Brentford B time. And it sounds like he'll probably be the starter. It sounds like Julian Eystone will be with the first team. Not starting, but it sounds like he'll be the backup, or he'll be sent on loan. But I think it's good for him in the sense that he's in a new environment. He's over in England, where, even for the Prem 2 teams, like those prospects on those teams are still pretty good. Like if you brought one of those Prem 2 teams over to MLS Next Pro, they probably would dominate. So him getting into a new environment, him taking a bit of a step forward. It's not like he's going to be in a pro environment. Maybe he'll get some looks with the Brentford first team in training, and sort. But I feel like this is going to be a good testing moment for him. Is he kind of ready to make that step, or does he come back here? Brentford does have an option to buy. Joe Paterno confirms. So if he performs well, then he'll be with Brentford going forward. If not, I guess he'll come back to Red Bull and kind of hopefully battle for the job next season or next year when the calendar switches over to a summer to spring schedule. So good for Aiden Stokes. I think he's definitely deserved the move. And now it's on him to kind of show his fortitude, his mental fortitude, and his ability over in England.
Yeah, well, thank you to you and Joe Pantorno for confirming that news and breaking that for us. So thank you very much. I think this leaves the Red Bulls goalkeeping room in a little bit of a unique position. Toby Ševčík, happy for him to get the opportunity to strut his stuff as the confirmed number one for Red Bulls 2, but
Yep.
we're not too far down the line from potential return for AJ Marcucci and his knee injury from last year. So it makes sense for Stokes, go out alone. But I think maybe Marcucci goes back, and I'm interested to see where he fits in.
I think the biggest thing is because I don't know if AJ is going to really do anything substantial the rest of the season. I think he's still kind of rehabbing himself, and I don't know if he'll get in a game or two this year. And hopefully, if he progresses well, he gets a game or two maybe at the end of the year. But I think the biggest thing for him is going into preseason next year, and he goes into that battling Ethan Horvath for the number one spot in the sprint season, because fans might not know, but Ethan Horvath's contract runs through the sprint season, and then he has a couple of option years.
Mm-hmm.
So if AJ Marcucci comes out and steals the job back from Ethan Horvath, it could be Ethan Horvath's neck going forward. And then if you say Stokes isn't bought by Brentford, then he could come back and potentially be the backup to AJ Marcucci next summer. So I feel like there's a lot of flexibility in this goalkeeping room for Red Bull. So I mean, if AJ comes back healthy, that's just going to push Ethan Horvath to even be better. Because, like you said, I feel like he has been average. He'll make a grade A save, but then you're like, I needed that. I needed that next one, man. That would have been a great moment to make a save. So I feel like he's been slightly average this year. So I think that's the grade I gave him for seeing red, was just a C. So I think you want to see more from him, especially the pedigree of where he's been and who he's played for. He's been a national team player. So yeah, the goalkeeping room's in an interesting spot. So shout out to Toby. He'll be the first team. He'll be the second team starter going forward, and that's good for him because it sounds like he's one of the best 2009 players in the class, regardless of position. So that's a good thing to hear, especially in a loaded class like that.
And we're not even sure where that leaves John McCarthy, too, because let's say Marcucci does come back and he's ready to play before the season's end. That's 3 first-team caliber goalkeepers, whether you want to say they're starting quality or not. That's you've got 2 backups, and you don't want to then take playing time away from Toby Shevchik and send one of those guys to play with the reserves. So it's an interesting place to be in. You have it as a 2-1 win for Orlando. I have it as a 1-1 draw. We'll see what happens with a lot of these players moving forward. We'll see if there's any big changes within the transfer situation for this Red Bulls team. And we'll see just how much time I have to continue getting these episodes out. But I was glad I was able to welcome you in for this one, Dan. Thank you for joining me. Daniel Rebain,
of course, man.
Area Sports Network. You can find him on Twitter. He's very involved in the Red Bull landscape. Thanks for coming on. This has been Empire Soccer Report. I've been James Birle. Guys, thank you so much for bearing with us through this break and for joining us again. We'll see you next time.